Well, thank you very much for joining me. My guest on WPR Music is Dr. Cheryl Frazes Hill, just finishing up her ninth season as the chorus director of the Milwaukee Symphony Chorus. And she is also celebrating 50 seasons with the Chicago Symphony Chorus, starting as a singer and later moving into the associate conducting role. And she has also written a biography of that chorus's founding director, Margaret Hillis. And she's a professor emerita at Roosevelt University's Chicago College of the Performing Arts. I could go on, and her daughter's getting married in a couple of months. So you've been keeping busy. Welcome so much, Cheryl. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor and a privilege to speak with you today.
Well, we're talking because the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra is releasing a brand new live recording of the Brahms German Requiem. And before we get to that and the specifics and so forth, I wanted to ask about your current season. I alluded to the fact that you've been staying pretty busy. The 50th anniversary of the Milwaukee Symphony Chorus is just wrapping up, and holy mackerel, what a season you have had.
It has been a season of blockbusters and also of diversity because we started out, of course, with Beethoven, and we're ending with Beethoven. But in between has been Handel and Bach. And so I feel like it's been a car that we've had to switch gears. As soon as we are nice and open, then we have to bring it back in for the more Baroque style. But that's really been the magic of this chorus. They really are remarkable in the sense that we can move into all of these different styles, and they're able to pretty seamlessly make that happen. And I should say too, I'm so grateful to the Milwaukee Symphony for the way that they've celebrated the chorus, because these are masterworks that would normally be done in a period of maybe 3 or 4 seasons or over a period of time, and to have them all in one season. Our chorus has worked remarkably hard to make it happen. A lot of rehearsals and a lot of homework.
Yes, lots of homework. I have a friend who sings in the chorus, and my colleague Lori Skelton has been a singer in the chorus. And boy, that is an awful lot. It's more of a marathon than anything. And I imagine it's been hard, not hard, but rewarding, but certainly an awful lot of work. But I wanted to ask you about preparing a chorus for those various kinds of works, from Brahms to Beethoven to the Baroque to Handel and Bach. How does that differ?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of different aspects to it, but I mean, the common denominator is that there is a foundation that all symphony choruses must have, and building into that is their dexterity, their ability to shift into different vocal weight and into different style, and that is what these rehearsals are for. I mean, obviously, it's we do a lot of work with notes and rhythms and text, but I would have to say that built into all of this is uh, helping them develop as an ensemble. They become an instrument, and that instrument has to play in many different um, timbres and different weights and different colors, and the text, of course, they have to be flexible with text. We've done a lot of German this year, but certainly Latin is a is a shift, and then sometimes you're into German Latin. So right now we're doing Missa Solemnis, so we're using the Austro-German dialect of the Latin. That helps to color the sound, but most importantly, we have to build that flexibility and that dexterity, not only in their own voices, but working within the ensemble to create that shape and the style that is very different from piece to piece.
I'm curious, as a choral singer myself, how you map out rehearsal schedules for all of these masterworks.
I was very fortunate. You mentioned that I wrote a book. My mentor was Margaret Hillis, who founded the Chicago Symphony Chorus, and by the way, was a very close friend to Margaret Hawkins.
Oh,
So I feel that there's this wonderful connection of my past to my present. Um, and Margaret Hillis was a very regimented and very disciplined conductor. And it all begins with score study. And so, what I learned from her is how the score informs you of how you're going to actually tackle a work like this, how it's going to break down, and what are the challenges going to be in each piece, which every piece has its different um, challenges. And then once I have studied the score and figured out for us what it is going to be that will, what mountains we have to climb, I then sit down with, and I create a chart. And that chart, I work backwards. I work from the performance date backwards. And that chart has every movement of the piece, and it has every rehearsal date, and how I'm going to break those dates down. Am I going to break them into sectionals? Am I going to be rehearsing just a small group at a time, what have you? And then the focus becomes which movements need more attention, which may need a little bit less attention, and um, and then it's a layering process. So, of course, notes and rhythms are addressed in the early stages, but always with that sense of what the piece in its entirety has to express. That's always in my ear. But as we go from the notes and the rhythms, and then we build in the text, and as we move into the expressive qualities, the volume, the style, the inflection, and what have you. Each layer gives them an opportunity to revisit the things that we've already worked with, but at the same time, you're adding complexity. Last night in Misa Solemnis, which is close to the end now, we're still working with transitions because it's such a complicated piece that there's so much attention that has to be given to each section that actually running it is not uh, it's not necessarily helpful until all the separate pieces feel very solid. And so that's kind of the stage we're in now, is to create this whole, which is the sum of the parts. So it's kind of like it's a chess game. It's a little bit improvisatory in terms of where I think I should be versus where I am, and then you're always shifting, but there's always a plan, and I always start with the plan and I try to stick as closely to it as possible.
oh, wonderful to have been mentored by Margaret Hillis. That's
A great
must have,
gift.
yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned the Beethoven that you're working on right now. Beethoven was notorious for not particularly being friendly to the voice. Uh,
Depends on what section. He had
that's,
something against sopranos, I'm
I
sure.
he
Our
must
dear
have
sopranos.
unrealistic expectations sometimes, I think. But Brahms, on the other hand, was a really deft composer for the voice. And you certainly hear that in many of his pieces, but listening back to the Requiem as I was getting ready for this, it was just so clear how intricate, how deeply he understood the voice and how it's expressed. And I wonder, does it make it easier to work with Brahms or?
It's so interesting that you're saying this because I think that was in many ways as difficult a challenge, even though we've done it before. Um, it was as difficult a challenge as the Missa Solemnis has been, because both pieces demand tremendous stamina
Mm.
and a wide range, not only a vocal range, but a wide range of expression and an ability to move into very different characters, sometimes very rapidly. And so, from the standpoint of vocal skill, I would say you have to be as skilled a singer to be successfully performing the Brahms as you would be the Missa Solemnis, even though they're very different in terms of demands in some ways, In other ways, I find it just as challenging for our singers. I find I'm having to build their stamina, their vocal stamina, as much for this piece as I did for the Brahms. The Brahms is, um, and yes, Brahms was very adept at composing for voices. But the thing about the Brahms is it is so exposed in so many places. When people listen to a good performance of Brahms' Requiem, they don't really understand how difficult it is. And you, of course, you do it until it doesn't sound difficult. But but it I know when I'm listening to a performance of my own preparation, I find myself on the edge of my seat because there are so many places that are just death defying. It's kind of like watching the Olympics, and you're watching these final moments of an incredible gymnastic feat. And there are so many vocal gymnastics that go on in the Brahms. And in the Beethoven, it's a much more aggressive version of that, but it's still the same. So in many ways, though, I think Beethoven wrote much more instrumentally for voices, and I think Brahms was really thinking about vocalists. And he himself was a choral conductor, and he had a great understanding of the voice in that way. And yet, that piece is one of the great challenges. You know you've listened to a chorus that has really addressed those challenges when you listen to it and it just goes flawlessly.
It's a piece that radiates such warmth and also expresses such uh, such grief too. And I wonder if, as you're working on it with the chorus, if the emotions ever get the best of you or get the best of members of the chorus.
You know, our soloist at the end, our bass soloist at the end of the one of the performances, just completely broke down in tears during the bows. And I think most of us walked away in those performances with a similar feeling. I can say that there was a similar emotional release after our St. Matthew Passion, and I have a feeling we will have the same after this Beethoven. Um, all three of these composers, um, I believe, were deeply connected to the settings of these texts. Of course, for Brahms, he selected which parts of scripture and so forth. I mean, it is not a requiem in the normal sense of the word. And it's interesting that you say that it's filled with grief. It's actually filled with consoling
Mm.
that he sets up in so many of the movements by explaining how vulnerable we are. We are all uh, like grass that withereth. Um, and yet, at the end of each of those movements, there's always that turning point with the comfort of knowing we have to trust. Every movement has that idea of, yes, life is challenging, and the most painful moments are the most challenging in some ways. But Brahms is clearly leading us to the place of comfort. And the purpose of this requiem and his writing it had to do as much for his own comfort and what consoled him. And so it's rather cathartic in that way. He doesn't even mention the dead until the final movement. Selig sind die Toten. Blessed are the dead. But in the opening, it's blessed are they that mourn. And so it's all about those of us who are here, those of us who are left behind, and how to navigate that journey. For Beethoven, he was not necessarily known as a religious, uh, observant person. However, he found religion. He found it through his walks in the woods and through nature. But this was a fervent connection, and you can really feel Beethoven's his his desire to express how he felt. And so one of the things we talked about in rehearsal last night is it's not enough to just do the dynamics as he's indicated them, or to be obedient with entrances and with contrasts. You really have to understand the text. It's not necessarily about being of that religion, because I think all of these pieces can speak to anybody of any level of observance, and everybody can glean from this something um, of the messages that are being shared. So I think that the idea of having to, and it's really the hardest thing, I think, for choruses, because not only do you have to feel it, but you have to have the corporate feeling of it. You know, within your section and within the ensemble, it has to move, and it's kind of a living thing that the breaths have to be taken in corporately, because only then can we, do we feel what the intent was of the composer. And I always tell the singers, the audience will not feel anything that you don't. And
Mm.
again, it's not necessarily about belief, it's really about how you connect to the message and try to convey it through your own voice so that we are doing justice to the performance, to the composition.
Well, and you mentioned that these pieces speak to all creeds and all people. And
Right?
for this particular Brahms, he didn't even use the word Christ.
That's right.
It's really he. I mean, he took bits, lots of passages from the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, and so forth, but the word Christ is not mentioned once.
Well, none of the traditional movements are mentioned. And so it's, you know, this was a very personal work for Brahms. There's no question about it. To have handcrafted, I mean, he literally, he was, of course, he had lost his dear friend Robert Schumann, and then shortly after his mother, and so it came from a place of deep feeling and understanding, and the words that provided him consolation and the journey that he needed to go was one that was shared in this piece.
It's a beautiful journey, and I just had a chance to listen to the recording. And are you happy with how the journey went for you and the chorus?
It was a thrilling journey. I have been involved with many recordings through the years, but I was so appreciative of the MSO to invite me into the real nitty-gritty editing process. And that really began every night after each performance. It started there. So you're talking about a year and several months ago. And then listening to it over time and contributing thoughts and being able to step away from it and then come back to it. Um, and then, of course, working in tandem with Ken, David, and with the wonderful production people. And it was really I think it was a great process, a thorough process, and one that I feel really created a wonderful recording.
And the Bradley Center is well set up now, isn't it, for these kinds of recordings?
Yes, I'm very pleased with the sound that we were able to capture because it's such a beautiful hall, and so taking advantage of it and having something to as a keepsake for our singers is so important, and to then be able to share with the public is even more exciting.
As I was listening to this, there's been a recent loss in my family, and everybody has losses. Thank you. And there's difficulty and challenges in the world now, for heaven's sakes. And do you feel the Brahms German Requiem has a place in our current society, a way of consoling those who need consoling for all kinds of different types of grief?
Well, I think in the bigger picture, I think that music can do that. I think it's one of the tools we have, one of the coping mechanisms. And to whatever extent that this can be um, utilized for greater feelings that of that need consolation. Um, I think for us, I can just tell you, for us as singers, uh, this has been a tremendous um, support, and I noticed it more right after COVID because we all missed being together and being able to do this work and coming back and singing in masks and then being able to take off the masks and being able to reconnect because there are fewer and fewer things that we do now where we have to be present. You can't have a phone during our rehearsals. You can't be multitasking in the middle of a rehearsal. You could try, but we wouldn't like it. Your colleagues wouldn't like it, and most importantly, it wouldn't make sense in terms of the music. We wouldn't be able to do the work that we do. And I think one of the reasons that our singers come back week after week and are willing to do this work is because it takes us away from all of the things that we have to contend with. And that could be in our homes or it could be in the chaotic environment we're all living in these days. And so finding a piece like Brahms' Requiem, I can't help but think, even if you are not a classical music aficionado, it does resonate in some way. And then, of course, the more you understand it, the greater the way it connects. So certainly, I think it's applicable beyond uh, loss. But I have to say, for us on the performance side of it, it's been a gift in so many ways.
Well, it has also been a gift to the world, and the recording is just terrific, and it'll be out on June 5th, and that's available on all the major streaming platforms. And there's more information also at mso.org.
We're very excited.
Well, we are too, and so excited to share it with our listening audience. Well, Dr. Cheryl Frazes Hill, thank you so much for spending some time with WPR Music today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for sharing this upcoming event for us. It's been the culmination of a great 50-year celebration. So thank you.